The last time I got up and talked, which is totally fucking bizarre, by the way, because like I didn't train to do this. Like I trained to get into a small room with a lot of walls in between me and everyone else. But so the last time I gave a talk was with Roy at MAD, and afterwards someone came up and said, "God, I really loved your talk. You're so intense. I wouldn't want to work for you." It's one of those great moments where I'm just like, wow, like there were like all these things presented themselves that I could respond, and none of them seemed very appropriate. So I said, "Thank you," and but the thing is that it's true. Yes, I am, and my kitchen, we produce a lot of good cooks and a lot of good chefs. We also make a lot of people see that maybe that there's an easier way to learn a living, like ditch digging, ultimate fighting, and they leave the profession entirely. I wish I could say it another way. Cooking is hard. And the thing about it is it takes sacrifice. It takes a lot of energy. You give up your time. You give up a little bit of your life. And, we live in a time where there's this idea that you can have anything, It's kind of like the era of entitlement. And it's not true. There's a writer named Susan Cain, and she said, she made an observation over the last 100 years that the United States has moved from a culture of character to a culture of personality. And, as a cook, I think maybe we've kind of forgotten that to be a good cook, you don't need a great personality, but you do need character. So I thought, that was something that when I was thinking about like what I could talk about, and I had no idea whatsoever, I thought maybe I could talk about what I think is really a hard thing right now, which is what it means, how it is to be a young cook. When I started cooking, it was easy. You go into the kitchen, you make food, you go home. I mean, in between, you go to a bar and you have about 4 drinks, and then you get hungover, and then you do it again the next day. But there was no exit strategy. When I was growing up, the exit strategy for a chef was death, basically. But now there's like all of these options. You could have a television show. You could have like a promotional contract. You can do a million different things. But so few of them actually are about cooking. And so I think it's a really confusing time. So these are kind of some things that I thought about that I can't say that I wish that I was told when I was growing up, because there was only one way of cooking when I was growing up, But if I was a cook now, these are the things that I would think about. So, and this is from, I work with a lot of young cooks, and so these are things that I actually do say. And one is stay off the fucking internet. I mean, I think there's so when I was a kid, I played tennis and competitively. I had a coach who told me the good thing is you have peripheral vision. Bad thing is that you use it. And I think that's kind of how I feel about the internet. The internet's great, but the bad thing is we use it in ways that I think are really counterproductive. And I think especially social media, it's great for promoting your business, for getting the word out. But the fact is, it's also very damaging. Now, let's be honest. Cooks are not the emotional best, like, how do I put it? Most emotionally well-balanced people in the world. I mean, if you look at the inverse proportion of depression and self-esteem, it would be kind of like that, And so you're being constantly flooded with this information where you're being compared. What about, why isn't this person replying to me? Why isn't this person, following me? I get this all the time. So I have several restaurants. I have a lot of chefs. And what I've seen is that for a young cook, it's very distracting. And then that doesn't even get into the whole Instagram thing, where you see how everyone is plating food, but you have no idea how they're actually making it, or any of the underpinning that leads to actual creativity. So I think, I was lucky. When I was growing up, they didn't have that. which is crazy. I've now actually been cooking longer than most of my cooks have been alive, which is super depressing. But when I was 25, I opened my first restaurant in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't have any input, and I had to actually experience things. I had to go to farms, I had to pick things up, I had to taste things, and I had to have my own ideas, my own opinions about what was good and what wasn't good. And so I guess the thing that I would say is, if you want to be inspired, go to a farm, go to a market, pick something up, because the thing is that the cooking is about people. It's, the most human way, well, along with sex, that we relate to each other. And the internet has a distancing. And so I think to the extent that we all come face to face with each other and think about who we're cooking for, I think it makes the food better. Be curious. So open mind, open heart, open senses. One of the reasons I love to travel is I learn about how people think about food, how they feel about it. I learn about cultural traditions. And I think one of the best things a cook can do is kind of ask questions, listen a lot more than they talk. Put your opinions aside for a minute. Ask someone else what their opinion is, and then taste everything all the time. It's amazing to me how many young cooks, they don't taste. Say, well, what's that like? I don't know, I haven't tried it. And they've cut like 2.5 cases of it, but they haven't tasted one piece, And so in our kitchens, one of the things we teach people is from the second you handle something, taste it. Make a decision. See what you think about it. Maybe it's not good. Maybe you want to say, hey, I'll do this if you want, but it tastes a little different. What do you think? So part of it is curiosity, I think is very, very important as a cook. So, I remember when I was a young cook, and I made some excuse to the chef. I was like, she said, why didn't I do something right? And I said, oh, well, this other thing was going on in the kitchen, and she just puts her knife down. She looks at me and she says, a real cook, they train themselves to a certain level, and they don't let anyone move them from that level, no matter what the circumstance. I was 20, and I've remembered it ever since. I probably repeated it, well, this is probably the 1,000th time, because it made a lot of sense to me. There's this idea that, cooking is a craft, and craft is based on a discipline of doing things over and over and over. And I think that's really important. It's easy to kind of move up the ranks these days. There's probably more restaurants than there are cooks. And so it's easy to become a sous chef after a couple years and then a chef. But the fact is, cooking means doing the same thing over and over and over for years. That's the only way to get inside it and really learn it. So I was talking with one of my managers recently, and I was asking about a situation, and I was kind of concerned about it, and she said, I'm not worried. I said, what do you mean you're not worried? How can you not be worried? You should be worried about everything, And especially for us, there's a lot of expectation, but I think at any restaurant, be worried. Because cooking for someone is an incredible privilege, but it's also, for me, it comes with a lot of responsibility. People putting trust in you, They're spending money, they're spending their time. Be worried. But at the same time, don't be so worried that you're afraid to take risks. So I think taking risks is a big part of learning as a cook. You don't want to serve those every time they fail, but you don't want to be so afraid of failure that you don't take chances. Don't be defined by your failures, but at the same time, make sure that you have some, because otherwise you don't learn anything. Honesty. I think one of the big things is being honest with yourself is really, really important. And honesty means, are you getting ready to come on stage?
Honestly, you have 1 minute.
You got less than a minute now. But it's honestly fine.
Okay, so it means that you cook to the level that you're at, and don't try and be something we're told all the time that we're supposed to be the best of everything, because we get all of this feedback about lists. Cook better than you cooked yesterday, but not as good as what you imagine you should cook. And the last thing, if it's okay, that I want to say is just, it's been said a million times, and it's super cliche, but it's still so important. It's just cook with your heart. you know. And I think, you know, probably the best thing, the most important meal I've ever cooked was not in a restaurant. It's for my wife and her family when her mother died. And everyone was hungry, but they were kind of like paralyzed, you know. And so I got to the house, and I didn't know what to say. So I just started cooking for them. And I think it provided a sense of solace that only food can provide. So for me, I think, you know, there's so much to think about in the world of food, but the most important thing is you cook with openness, generosity, and with love in your heart. And I think that anything is possible. So.